at the time, the salary cap was you were allowed 20 players in your squad earning £20,000 or more. So I was in that 20. And what they'd done is they'd signed a few players. So what Steve said to me, he said, well, we've got 21 players now earning over £20,000 in our squad. If we register all those players, we're effectively breaking the salary cap. So what we've decided to do is we've decided not to register one of those players, and we've decided it's going to be you. So basically, you can come, you've got a year left on your contract, you can come, train, and we've got to pay you because we've got to honour your contract, but you can't play.
Cheers for coming on, Andy. I seen your book. I think it was advertised in one of the rugby papers or something like that, and I just thought, such a different story, because I can remember you playing, and I thought that when you were playing, you never hear that side of the story, do you, about your family addiction and things like that. So I thought, if you get you on, have a talk through it. But how old were you when you got into rugby?
Yeah, so thanks for mentioning my book. Anyway, this might be a good time to just give a little plug.
Yeah.
To the book. Yeah, so started playing when I was like 6 years old. Local club, Pudsey Rugby in West Leeds. I've got a brother who's a year older than me. So we both sort of started playing at the same time. My dad played like semi-professional for a few, played at like Halifax, Keighley. And actually on my mum's side, my granddad, so my granddad played, so that's my mum's dad. And then my mum's a twin. She's a twin. She's got a twin brother. So he played sort of semi-professional as well. And when I say semi-professional, I guess, you know, back in sort of like 60s, 70s, 80s, it was all, as you'll know, it was all semi-professional anyway. Yeah. So I guess based on that, I kind of had no choice but to play rugby. But yeah, I started playing at 6. Just took to it really enjoyed it. I loved sport as a kid, to be honest. At school, especially at high school, if somebody gave me a choice and I said, yeah, I'll do PE all day, every day. Do you know what I mean? I just love sport. I loved that side of it, and I excelled at quite a few sports. Actually, I was good at cross country at school. I was rubbish at football, no good with my feet. But I enjoyed a lot of sports.
Were you good at school? I always ask rugby league lads this, because I don't know any clever rugby league lads myself, but I'm hoping to come across someone, I was a biologist or something like that. Where was there other options out there? Just say you weren't into rugby, could you have easily went, I'm just going to be a doctor or something like that? Or was it rugby or nothing at the time?
Well, I guess I'm a bit in between. I'm certainly not a, biologist or doctor, but I did all right in my GCSEs. I got like 8 C's, got like 9 8 C's. I got like an A star in PE, but I guess some people say that don't count.
Yeah.
But no, I'm fortunate to be quite academic. I was fairly bright. I studied for my A levels when I left school, and I studied for my A levels. So I've got A levels as well. But I just remember at school thinking the worst thing I'd ever want to be when I grew up is something where I was sat in an office, staring at a computer screen. I was always very active, always, I did a paper round for years from being like 11 years old. I did a milk round. I remember like just going around the street and like offering like car washing service and stuff. So I was always like just very hands-on, I guess you'd say. But I was fortunate that I did have something to fall back on if, the rugby didn't work out when I was younger. So to answer your question, I was a bit in between. I want a dummy, but I want like a doctor.
Were you talented right off the get-go? Because I seen I think it might have been Lee Breeze or Paul Sculthorpe shared about picking up young kids at 12, turn them into professionals. But a lot of the time we're just picking the big kids. Do you know what I mean? The ones that have got a beard and a 6 foot 9-year-old, and like, there is the best player. But when they get to 16, everyone's caught up, and that's it. That big guy hasn't developed his skills. Were you one of these players, a bit of a late bloomer, or because you got signed at 15, didn't you?
Yeah, I actually was. It doesn't sound like it when you say I signed at 15, but I probably was a late bloomer. I remember like Leeds schools. I played for Leeds schools under 13s, and I remember there were an handful of lads in that team, and not it wasn't including me that had already signed. That signed like professional terms with Leeds, and a lot of those players I could say the names, but a lot of them didn't even go on to make it into the first team. Didn't even really. Some of them didn't even make a career in rugby at all. And I think, like you said, you spot on. You get at sort of 12, 13, you get those players that are just more physically developed than the other lads, and they're just running through and they look good because they're bigger. And I was probably, I think, I'd say I was fortunate in that respect. I wasn't small for my age, but I was just probably average. But I think that helps you to develop, especially in rugby league, like the other skills, you know, your evasive skills, your speed, and that kind of thing. And you know, you can't just go smash players, so you've got to probably have a bit better technique with your tackling, and things like that. So yeah, I was probably definitely a late bloomer. I was never a big player anyway. I played like mainly centre, a little bit on the wing, and I probably played at about 13 stone 10. So I wasn't a big player. But yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
It sickens a lot of players as well. I think from when I was younger, the ones that were getting picked up at like ridiculous ages, like always signed at 12, they're training like 4 or 5 nights a week. And like you said, the ones that got signed very young, I can't remember them even playing. And the left school, never mind like turning professional. I think they're sickened that much, and there was that much emphasis like you're going to be a professional player. I think there was that much pressure, and they were training. I think you get sick of the game, whereas people like yourself who carried on playing because they enjoyed it, developed naturally. And then I think 15, 16, you can start looking down the professional route. But before then, I think kids should be at the amateur clubs just playing.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly get that burnout. And even for me, like, because I was a good player, you're playing for like your club. So it's that, whether that was Pudsey for me or Stanley or Milford, because I played for a few different amateur clubs. You're playing for your club. So that you might play, like, say, that's on a Sunday. Then if you're good enough, you're getting picked for like Leeds schools and then Yorkshire schools. So that might be, you don't play that many games for them, but that might be enough. That might be on a Saturday. And then we had a school team, so you're playing for school, and then obviously you're training for all these teams. So certainly that is, I think I was close to burnout really when I was a kid. When looking back, I was close to sort of just getting too much of it. And when I look back, I wish somebody would have just said, no, that Andy, you're doing too much there. You need to just pull me back and say, no, you're not doing that. Because it's a natural thing is when you're a talented player, you know, the school teacher, PE teacher, he would desperately want me to play because, you know, I was like, you know, not being big-headed, but I was the best player. So without me, they were missing a big, you know, a big part of the team. And then there's pressure on all these other areas. You just feel that pressure that you've kind of got to play. And I think sometimes that needs to be taken, as a kid, that needs to be taken out of your hands. And you need somebody to say, no, actually, that's, you know, you're doing too much there. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying. That is the danger. I think in any sport, even football, look at football and it's the same. They're signing them as young as like 9. Getting him in at academies. And I think it's the pressure. I think it's the mental side and the pressure sometimes as well as the physical. But that pressure of the kids stop enjoying it because they're not just playing with their mates and they're not just playing at fun. They feel that pressure to perform and to improve. And I think just playing for fun, I think that's the best way to improve. I found that as a kid.
Not just that, there's pressure on the lads who sign that young, and if they don't make it, isn't it? Because everyone, all the family, and that'll be saying, "Oh, you're going to be playing for Man United or Wigan or Leeds or anything like that." And when it doesn't happen, you can see how they can go downhill mentally, can't you? Because they've set their life up now, haven't they? Like it's rugby or nothing. Especially when I was younger, homework and that just goes right out the window. If you've got a chance of doing something else, no one's bothered about school anymore. Whereas that like you say, maybe a bit more of a balance. Someone looking in maybe could say, because if you play rugby union, rugby league, you're doubling your career in school, aren't you? Because you'd have to play your union. If you play county union, you play that county league, your club team. It's like 4 teams you're playing for, plus your school. It's like 5 games potentially. Yeah,
and I was pretty fortunate. My parents were really good in that. They always sort of drilled into me, you need an education, you need a backup. You need a backup plan. And I remember as a kid, sometimes you think, you know, don't want a backup plan. I want to play rugby. Do you know what I mean? And like I say, I was good at cross country. I was like, when I was 15, I was Yorkshire champion at 800 metres. So, I mean, the difference now with athletics compared to when I was like 15 was you couldn't earn a living from that. It was all like, they were all part-time. Obviously now funded by Sport England, you can earn a living from doing that. So that would have been another option for me. To go into something like that. But yeah, you're right. I think young players, and I think they're good now. I think with the scholarship scheme, I think they do sort of clubs do get players doing, getting other qualifications, whether it's a trade or whether if they're academic, going down that road. But I guess I was fortunate at Leeds as well. When I signed at Leeds Rhinos, they had a really good apprenticeship scheme, probably the best in the whole. Out of the whole Super League, and they got lads doing MVQs. There was me and another lad, Matt Diskin. They sent us to sixth form college to study for his A levels because we'd done pretty well in his GCSEs. So I was blessed, really, and fortunate to have that. I know it wasn't there at other clubs.
Exciting though to sign a 15 at school and things, isn't it? Because you can walk. I can imagine for the first month you didn't take your Leeds Rhinos fleece off or jacket or whatever, just walking around town with that. Because everyone did that, didn't they? If you got picked for the county, you never took it off. It's like a tattoo. So that would have been exciting at the time. And the players you come through with at Leeds as well, like you said, the Matt Diskins, and Leeds at the time had the best youth system, didn't they? It just seemed to have a conveyor belt at that time of just bringing players through.
I think looking back, there was a period of about probably 4 or 5 seasons where I could name a few. I'm not name dropping here, but there was like lads I played with, like, Danny Maguire, Rob Burrow. I mean, me and Rob made his debut in the same game at Headingley against Hull in 2001. But you got Matt Diskin, Chev Walker, Ryan Bailey, Mark Calderwood. So all them players, Danny Ward, Kevin Sinfield, Jamie Jones Buchanan, all those players within about 3 years of each other. And I think it was testament to what Leeds did. I think when Gary Everton came in sort of that sort of 96, 97, I think he set out a plan to really heavily invest in the youth and get some of the best, try and sign some of the best young players. I mean, Kevin Sinfield is from Oldham, so he's not a local lad to Leeds, and obviously they signed him. And there were other players that weren't as local, but they really made that conscious effort to sign local talent, and not just sign them, but invest in them. Like, one of the best coaches I had, I know you're going to probably ask me about this, but was Dean Bell. Dean Bell came to Leeds probably in about 95, 96 as head coach, and then he didn't do so well because it was his first job as head coach, and he didn't do so well at Leeds, and they kind of demoted him to head of youth development.
Yeah.
He was massive for a lot of players. I know when you hear some other players that I've mentioned talk about their development, and a lot of them mention Dean Bell, because he was just a great, really good coach, and not just on the field, but off the field. The mentality of being a professional rugby player, it really instilled that. So I'll be forever grateful to Leeds as a club and to Dean Bell in particular for how he sort of took that time and that to input into me as a person as well as a player. But yeah, it was like just a conveyor belt of players at that time that Leeds were producing.
People think you're on a fortune as well, don't they? Like, as well, even when you're coming into the Leeds team. And I think when I started realising the money wasn't great, I think Ashton had went from Wigan to Northampton. And I think he was on at Wigan like 9,000 or 60. It was somewhat ridiculously low. And then Northampton, he was going to be on like 150,000. It was like people saying, "Oh, I can't believe he's leaving Rugby League." And you're like, they've put his wages in there. I can believe he's got to leave in Rugby League. At that sort of age, 18, 19, in Super League, I think I talked about in McDermott, some people are on really low wages. That like what's an average wage, would you say, for someone coming into a squad?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind talking about the money side of it now. When I was playing, I certainly wouldn't have spoke about it. But when I signed, I was an apprentice for 3 years. I signed at 15. I was an apprentice, and as an apprentice, you were getting, I think your first year, you got something like £40 a week. and then you got like playing in academy, you got like £30 a game, so like £70 a week. And that kind of went up in stages. I think the second year you maybe got £50 a week as an apprentice, and then you got £70 a week. And then I was fortunate enough that after my 3-year apprentice as an apprentice, Leeds offered me a full-time contract. But I was on 12 grand a year as a full-time professional player at 18 years old. And that was kind of probably average, the standard sort of contracts that Gary Everington were offering young lads. And looking back, I think that Gary probably took advantage of the fact that young players loved Leeds, they supported Leeds from being a kid like I did, and many other players, and just wanted to play for the club, and they wanted that opportunity. I think also, not to put all that on Gary, but I think the money's just wasn't in the game, and it's still not in the game. But yeah, I mean, you've got say players like me that was coming into the first team, 12 grand a year, playing alongside players, established players, super like Yestin Harris was in the team, players like Keith Senior will have been on £100,000 plus a year. So I think I always, when I think back, I think, and I don't know if they could do this now, is they could have a minimum. Almost a minimum wage, especially once you get to 18. Because like I said, I think Gary took advantage in terms of he knew a lot of those players were still living at home with their parents. They didn't need a lot of money. And they were just after that opportunity. And I think average, to answer your question about average, I think back then, and it's not dissimilar now. I know I've heard people, I remember listening to Leon Price talk on Rugby AM. And he was talking quite a lot about the money side of the game, and he was saying, from the early 2000s to now, players' wages they've not changed, they've not gone up. So I would say anything between £20,000 and £50,000 a year is probably what your average Super League player is earning. Don't get me wrong, there'll be an handful of players that will be on £100,000 plus, but they will be, there won't be many. There might be, 3 or 4 in a squad, I would imagine. But I just think I think it's rugby league in general. Like, it's not, the sport doesn't generate the money.
No, I don't think it's
a case of that the clubs are just being tight and they don't want to give players the money. I don't think they've got it. And I think I think when you look at youth development now, I think that is an issue, because if you've got a young lad who's good at football and he's good at rugby. I mean, Danny Maguire's a perfect example. He was really good at a lot of sports, and he could have it. I think he could have had his pick of different sports. I know he's good at cricket, but I think if somebody said to a young player now, well, you become a Super League professional and you're going to earn maybe 50 grand a year, but you can go play cricket or you can go play football and you go play this and you could earn this amount. Because I think the reality is you've got to be at the top of your game in rugby league. I always compare this to football. In football, you could be like, say, a League 2 player, so you're not at the top of your game. You'd be like classed as an average football professional, and you'd be earning a lot more than a rugby player who's at the very top of the game. So I think there's that disparity, but I think it happens in all sports. It's all about market values, isn't it, and what's there to be earned.
Was that one of the reasons you left Leeds, or was it to get more first team opportunity? Because you went to Salford next?
Yeah, so I kind of made my debut in 2001, and I had 2 seasons, 2001, 2002, where I was in and out of the team. I was sort of a fringe player, really. I'd get in. I'd be getting picked if we had players injured. And I guess looking back at that time as a centre, Keith Senior was one of the centres. Tony Carroll, the Australian, he was the other centre. Chev Walker was he's a year below me, but he was at the club and he kind of made his debut at a similar time to me. So I had sort of them 3 players probably all in front of me at that time. So it was always going to be difficult. And I think as a young player, you always want to challenge yourself. You always want to push. And once I'd sort of made a handful of first team appearances at Leeds, and I felt, I can play at first team, I guess you sort of itching to establish yourself. And over them 2 years, I just felt I didn't quite get the opportunity, and for no fault of my own, probably just the fact that there were those quality players in my position. Leeds were one of the top teams, so I remember going in with my dad to speak to Gary and just said, I'd like to go on loan if I can, because I had a year left on my contract. I think this was the start of 2003. I had a year left on my contract at Leeds, and I thought, I want to go somewhere where I can play, hopefully Super League regular. And Halifax came in, who were in Super League, but they'd had the financial troubles, so they'd let go a lot of top players, and they were kind of touted as being the whipping boys that year. And then Salford came in, who had just been relegated in 2002, and Carl Harrison was the coach, and they came in, and they was in the league below Super League, but they had just. I remember Carl and the conditioner came over to my house and spoke to me, and just had some real good ambition to get back into Super League. And they were even talking about the new stadium then, which didn't come about for at least another 10 years or so. But they were so I ended up going to Salford basically, and I had a really good season there in the Championship. I think I scored like 24 tries in 26 games. We were top of league. And we won the grand final and got promoted to Super League. And one of the reasons, to answer your question, one of the reasons that I ended up leaving Leeds, so at the end of that season, I had the chance to stay at Leeds, or Salford offered me a contract as well. But again, looking back, Gary Everton, again, I mentioned him, but and he's a smart bloke, because how it worked at that time with young players, if you were under 24 and you'd been developed by a club, you couldn't go even if that club didn't offer you, if they offered you the same money as you were on. So all Gary had to do is offer me the same contracts, 12 grand a year, and then if I wanted to go somewhere else, Leeds could demand a transfer fee for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I can remember there was a weird rule where if you're under 24, you had to get offered more money or something like that, or you couldn't get offered less. Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Well, what Leeds had to do is if they didn't offer me a contract, I could have gone to Salford and there'd have been no transfer fee. But Gary knew if they offered me the same money, then Salford would have to pay a transfer fee for me. And Leeds could obviously determine what that fee was. So basically, that's what happened. So even though Leeds offered me a contract, I kind of knew they didn't really want me. They were just doing it so that they could get a transfer fee from me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, I mean, Salford offered me like twice double the money I was on at Leeds. So it was a bit of a no-brainer, really. I could, once I went to Salford, I signed up signing for Salford. I think Leeds asked for 15 grand transfer fee for me. And Salford, they paid that, and I went to Salford, and I was on like twice as much money. Still want a millionaire by any means, but it allowed me to be able to get a mortgage and buy a house. So I'd have loved to have stayed at Leeds, but I think it worked out. It worked out in the end, and I signed a 2-year contract at Salford, and obviously played most of that first season in Super League with Salford. So that was good. It was good
because he had some good players. Salford back in the day, they recruited, like, was Bobby Goulding, them type of people there then, or was it?
He just left.
Maloney? Yeah.
I think when they got relegated at the end of 2002, I think Bobby Goulding, Francis Maloney, I think they all left. But I mean, Malcolm Alker stayed. They had players like Andy Kirk, Malcolm Alker, Neil Baines, Stuart Littler, Gavin Clinch, the scrum half. But yeah, they kept a lot of them Super League players. So there were Super League players really playing in the Championship, and I think we were the only full-time team in that 2003 in the Championship. So that gave us a massive advantage to start with.
And where did you go after Salford? Because you never stayed at a club that long, did you? You were at Salford, and then was that for you, or was it because each club? Because in Super League, you can be at a club and sign a 10-year contract, and then they get relegated. That contract means nothing, does it? Or if they go bankrupt, and I always feel sorry for Super League players because they probably get a mortgage and think, I'm at Wakefield now for 3 years, and then 8 months later, I'm jobless. Because it happens nearly every year, doesn't it? In Rugby League, people just get left.
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah. I'd have loved to have stayed at one. To answer your question, I'd love to have stayed at one club all my career, or just settle somewhere. But it just never seemed to happen. And I think looking back, it was no fault of my own, really. The situation at Salford. So I played that first full year at Salford in Super League, and I had a reasonable year personally. To say it was like my first full season in Super League. Um, and then basically at the end of that season, we're going into the following pre-season. Steve Sims, who was the football manager at Salford at that time, he sort of pulled me to one side and basically said to me, I don't know if you probably know this, John, but at the time the salary cap was you were allowed 20 players in your squad earning £20,000 or more. So I was in that 20, and what they'd done is they'd signed a few players. So what Steve said to me, he said, "Well, we've got 21 players now earning over £20,000 in our squad. If we register all those players, we're effectively breaking the salary cap. So what we've decided to do is we've decided not to register one of those players, and we've decided it's going to be you. So basically, you can come. You've got a year left on your contract. You can come, train, and we've got to pay you because we've got to honour your contract, but you can't play." So they basically screwed me over, and I was just I was just in shock at first when he first. I was just like, what's going on here? But I think it's a good example, really, of how, and it's still the same now as a professional. I think sportsman in a lot of sports, you're just a piece of meat.
Yeah,
just a commodity, really. And as soon as they want to change it or they want to bring someone else in, there's no loyalty, there's no sentiment. It's see you later, And so I kind of were in a bit of a quandary for a few months, really. And fortunately, my agent was a guy called Richard Kramer, who's a sports lawyer. You might have heard of Richard.
I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was my agent at the time, and he was dealing with the situation and dealing with Salford. And in the end, he said, "Andy, what you need to do is you're going to have to hand in your resignation, and then what we'll have to do is go to an employment tribunal to basically, get, I think they call it mitigating your loss." So what I did was Richard got me in at Wakefield. So Wakefield, it was difficult at the time because we're talking like January, February time. And all the clubs had their
salary cap sorted and things.
Yeah, they had the squads full, really. So it was tricky. But Wakefield knew my situation. They offered me a 1-year deal, which was a lot less money that I was on. But they knew that I was taking Salford to an employment tribunal to try and get some money back. In the end, I lost in the tribunal. But I'd gone to Wakefield for a year. And again, a coach, an Australian coach called Shane McNally. I don't know if you remember him. He was there. So he took them, I think they finished the highest they'd ever finished. They were in the playoffs in 2004 with Wakefield. First time they'd ever got into playoffs. And then I signed for them at the start of 2005. Shane McNally was a coach, and I was playing quite regularly. And I got a couple of injuries mid-season. And then Shane McNally got sacked. And Tony Smith took over, not the coach, Tony Smith. Do you remember the player? Played at Castleford. The scrum he was a scrum half.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, so he was assistant coach to Shane, and he took over. And he basically pulled, I was out of the team because I had a few injuries, but he basically pulled me into the office and said, "Listen, Andy, there's players in front of you in the pecking order. There's 10 games left this season. I'm probably not going to play you. You're probably not going to get into the team. So if you want to leave, you can leave. I'll speak to the chairman and see if they'll pay you off." So again, that was just another blow, really. And I ended up going to Halifax. I'd spoke to Castleford. Castleford were interested. So towards the end of that season, I went to Halifax because they were in the playoffs for the 2005 season in the Championship.
Yeah.
Went to Halifax. Anthony Farrell, who played at Leeds, he was a coach there. And I'd played with him a little bit at Leeds when I first came through at Leeds. We'd played together, and so he knew me as a player. So I sort of we nearly got to I think we got beat by Castleford in the semi-final in 2005. And then Castleford went on to beat Whitehaven in the final to get promoted. But I ended up staying at Halifax another season. And then again, it sounds like, when I'm talking, it sounds like my career was cursed.
Yeah.
And I can laugh about it now when I'm looking back. But so I went to Halifax and signed for another year, full season. Probably, again, just over halfway through that season, Anthony Farrell got sacked. And Martin Hall came in, the ex-Wigan hooker who was there. He came in, took over. I played the rest of that season, but Martin had kind of I think he decided pretty early on he wanted to sort of build his own team. So basically, I reckon 3/4 of players in that team, he didn't offer another contract, which was, again, another blow, because I actually got the Player of the Year. I won the Player of the Year award that season at Halifax, but they didn't offer me another contract. So then I went to Widnes. Then Steve McCormack signed me at Widnes, and they were in the Championship, but they were full-time. So I was able to stay full-time. And we had a great season there. I was in and out of the team because we had Toa Love was one of the centres that signed him from Wannington. Mick Nanning, which you'll probably know because he played at Whitehaven. He was the other centre. So I kind of was in and out of the team, on the bench. But I loved it at Widnes because Steve was a great coach.
Steve's a nice fella, isn't he? It's even if you're not getting picked, Steve's a nice fella, isn't it? There's no way around it. I didn't know many people that didn't like Steve, really.
Yeah. A good man manager, I'd say. He was really good. You wanted to play for him because he was a real nice guy, and I think he was honest. He was pretty honest. I remember Toa Love got banned for 5 matches. He laid someone out. I think we were playing against Batley, and he just laid this guy out, and he got sent off, and he got 5-match ban. And I sort of played. I had a run of games, those 5 games, and I remember thinking I was playing really well, actually. And I remember sort of saying, because I sort of connected with Toa, because I really looked up to him as I was coming through. He was at Warrington, and he was probably a centre I tried to model my game on. So it was great to play with him, and he was a real good guy. And I remember saying to him when I was playing and he was out of the team, I remember saying, when you come back into the team, you're gonna be straight back into the team. And he was like, no, Kirky, you're playing really well. I think you'll keep your place in the team. And I remember saying, I think you'll be straight back in. And what that actually happened, he was straight back in. And again, he was probably earning twice as much as me. So that was a factor. It was a big name signing for them. And Steve was honest with me about it. He didn't try to sort of feed me any fluff and sort of say, he was pretty honest about why. And I always respected that, because I had other coaches that weren't as honest in my career. But
it's better someone comes out and says that, isn't it? Because yourself, I hardly ever played, but if I got picked for Whitehaven or something like that, and you were replacing someone that's on a lot more money, maybe come up from a Super League club, when they're back, you're in. Yeah. And it's better than a coach saying, I just didn't like the way you scooted that ball last. And you're like, no, let's just be honest. He's getting back in, he's getting paid a lot more. He's the one who you want in the first team. I think sometimes that honesty is just better than sugarcoating it, saying, I didn't like how you sprinted on Thursday, or you dropped a bomb in training, or just be honest.
Yeah. No, definitely, yeah. No, I think you're right, and I appreciate that about Steve, and he was that kind of bloke. So, but again, we had a great season. We got beat by Castleford in the grand final at Headingley, so we missed out on promotion. And again, I had in my contract, I had a clause where if we got promoted, I would have been offered a certain contract on a certain amount of money. So that was a real blow, because it would effectively give me a contract in Super League and another chance at Super League. But as it happened, we got beat, and then the day after I remember we was out like Mad Monday, and we got the sort of a rumour that the club had gone into administration, which effectively, as you probably know, John, it makes everybody's contracts null and void. Everyone's a free agent. So again, that was I've done a year at Widnes and settled in, enjoyed it, and we've effectively made free agents. And then I ended up going to Featherstone, A lot of the players at Widnes stuck around, and I think a guy called Steve O'Connor, it was something to do with Stobart, Eddie Stobart, but he took over the club. But I mean, I ended up, and a lot of players, because it was quite a while, it wasn't like straight away. There was like a couple of months where just they were in limbo, they were in administration, nobody knew what was going on. So Featherstone came in for me, and I signed a 2-year contract at Featherstone, which was like a part-time contract. But I was on pretty good money for a part-time club. So that was, I did 2 years there. And then at the end of that, I retired. I was only 27. And
it's early to retire, isn't it? Like when you went to Featherstone, I thought like if you were getting like, I don't know how much money off Featherstone plus a job, that'll put you on more than the average Super League player, wouldn't it? I thought that would have been like, but like you say, it takes up all your life. If you're a part-time player, it's borderline nearly a full-time job, isn't it? Really, if you've got to train twice a week, weights twice a week, full Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. And a lot of players say, and it was the same for me, I earned more money playing part-time at Featherstone, and I got a job as a postman, worked for Royal Mail, and I was earning more money doing that than I was at full-time Super League. So that was good side of it, but obviously it takes up, you're not sort of a full-time player anymore. You're training part-time, you're working, most players are working full-time. So if you've got a family, it just puts a real strain on that, on your time. And I guess for me personally, what happened again at Featherstone, it was like, I don't know if I was the curse, but David Hobbs signed me at Featherstone. He got sacked that first season, probably near the end of the season. John Sharp came in. He came in. John Sharp coached at Huddersfield, and he was in the England setup. And then Darryl Powell. So they appointed Darryl Powell. Now the interesting thing was when Darryl came in. Darryl, and just say this to start with, I think Darryl, fantastic coach. And what he's done in Super Leagues, been brilliant, especially at Castleford. And I always kind of knew, he would do that when he went to Castleford, because he's a very good technical coach. And I would imagine even now he's probably even better from when he coached me at Featherstone, just because of that experience. But he was the head coach at Leeds when I left Leeds. And I wasn't getting that many opportunities, and I kind of got the impression that he didn't particularly rate me as a player at Leeds, and that's probably why they allowed me to go on loan to Salford. So kind of when he came to Featherstone and I had a year left on my contract, I kind of knew in the back of my mind, I'm probably going to, at the end of this year, no matter how I play, I'm probably going to be out, because I know this coach don't particularly rate me, and I'd seen it all before. You like, when new coaches coming in. So anyway, I played that season, and then, at the end of the season, they didn't offer me a contract. And I had a few opportunities to go play part-time at Championship clubs and League One clubs, but I'd kind of had enough at that point. I think in my head, I thought I want to play another 2 or 3 seasons, but I think just skipping from club to club, and I guess you just realise that, you just think, what am I doing it for, really? It's not, I guess as a professional, say, footballer, you can think at the end of my career, I can sit at home, I can count my money, I don't have to get a job if I don't want, but I guess as a professional rugby league player, you're always thinking of life after that. I'm thinking, well, what's my quality of life going to be? I don't mean to sound dramatic, but when you're playing professional rugby league, you're putting your life on the line every time you go out there. And obviously, like players like Mossy Massoy that have had, those sort of injuries. And obviously what's happening with Rob. And obviously that's not necessarily directly related to playing rugby, but
there seems to be a lot of rugby players that suffer from that illness, doesn't it? And
you're putting your body on the line week in, week out. And I think I just got to a point where I thought, thinking about my life after rugby, and I think mentally it took its toll on me. I think just all those things that I've talked about, looking back, I think mentally took a toll on me, and I just thought, I've just had enough. I just want to get out. I want to just have a normal job, because there's the pressure, I think, as well. I think people don't realise that as a professional rugby player, you're being tested every week. and you're only really two bad games away from being dropped. Then once you're dropped, you're probably not far away from not being offered a contract, and then you're not far away from having to find another occupation, because it's not like, say, in football where you could play Premier League, Championship. If the club don't want you, you're pretty guaranteed you can go get another club and earn a full-time wage. Rugby's not like that. So,
especially 1-year contracts, aren't they? 1-year contracts, because 2 months into that 1-year contract, you're thinking what you're going to do next year, aren't you? Your missus will be saying, oh, we need to buy a house. And you're like, well, I don't know if we can put a deposit down. I don't know what I'll be working next year. And rugby leagues, that's what's different with rugby league and rugby union. I feel like rugby union has that bit more security. I've seen players like at Northampton and Saracens will pick up an injury and the club will be like, we're going to give you a 2-year contract. Whereas because there isn't the money in rugby league, what is injured? Well, 6-month contract or something like that, isn't it? Or when we're not renewing it because you've done your leg this year. And because the money's so tight, I think they've got to be like, well, obviously just miles tighter with the cash than rugby union football and the bigger sports.
Definitely, you're right. And something similar happened to me at Featherstone. I tore my bicep tendon off the bone in that first season at Featherstone, and I didn't get diagnosed properly by the physio to begin with. And in the end, I had the operation, but they had to sort of cut my leg and take some tendon out of my leg and graft it into my arm. So it was a pretty big operation, and it was looking like I was going to be out for 6 months. In the end, I was like 4 months, but it was like the club Featherstone paid for the operation, but like I think it was 2 days after the operation, my agent Richard Kramer phoned me and said, I've had the Featherstone chairman on the phone talking about wanting to pay you off. Basically, they wanted to get rid of me. So again, it just shows you that, you're just a piece of meat, and as soon as good to them, they just want rid of you. I mean, in the end, I said, well, I didn't go. I just said, well, if they're willing to pay me my full contract, I'll take that and go. But they didn't. They wanted to give me a couple of grand just to go away. So I just kind of dug my heels in and said, no, I'm gonna, I want to recover and stay. And as it happened, I got back probably in about 4 months into the team, playing regularly, and that ended up being my last season. But I think all that contributed to me retiring at 27, just thinking, mentally thinking it's not worth it.
Do you ever regret retiring so young? Have you ever sat in the house, maybe had a few cans, watching Super League on a Friday night and thought, I wish I could still play. I wish I'd maybe done it for a few more years? Because if I was you, being a fast outside back, I'd have just went to rugby union. I don't think enough rugby league lads know how much money you can make in rugby union. Do you know what I mean? Even if you thought, I'm going to sign for Doncaster rugby union probably pay more than the Super League club.
No, it's a good point, that, John. Yeah, no, it's a good point. And interestingly enough, when I at the end of that contract at Featherstone, I had an offer off Coventry Rugby Union to go play there, and I'd never played rugby union in my life. And typical rugby league lad, we always used to call rugby union, kick and clap.
Yeah.
We called rugby union players rah-rahs. So I was probably a bit prejudiced against rugby union, and I never enjoyed watching it. Typical rugby league lad who used to watch it and think, why are they just kicking it into touch? Why are they not trying to score a try? But you're right, and at the time, Coventry was, it was part-time, and it would have been a 2-hour drive. And I just, I'd done all that with Widnes and Salford, the driving over M62, and yeah, I'd had enough. And to answer your question, do I ever look back and think, I wish I hadn't retired? Probably the opposite, really. I kind of look back and sit down, and I still follow Super League and watch it. I love it. I think it's one of the greatest. I think it's the greatest team sport in the world, Rugby League. And I watch it now, and it is since I retired, and I have no desire at all to play. And I look at it and think, I'm glad I'm not playing. And I sometimes look at it and think, how did I do that? It's just, the physicality of the game, that week in, week out, it takes its toll on you, not just physically, but mentally as well, because you're always under that pressure thinking, I've got to perform, and if I don't, I might have to get another career. So to answer your question is, I don't miss playing. I don't particularly miss training. I keep fit. I'm active. I go to the gym. I do running. you know, I train pretty hard, to train very hard actually, but the only thing I'd say I do miss is just that camaraderie, just being around the lads, being in the dressing room at training, you know, the banter. As you'll know, John, you've played the game, and you'll know what it's like in those team environments. I think as a bloke, I think it's mentally it's so good for you.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I do miss, if I'm honest, about being a professional player.
And obviously, when you play, this is something we're going to touch on, is you were going through an addiction, and it's such a different addiction. I read about it. I think it's probably the first time I've ever seen this addiction pop up, but I can remember some on Channel 4. You'll explain the addiction a bit better than me. How did that affect you, and what age did that start?
Yeah, so I was addicted to pornography, which sort of developed into the porn addiction, developed into sex addiction. And I was first saw pornography when I was 11 years old. And again, I'm quite open about this when I talk about it in my book. And that was one of the motivations for writing the book, really, was just to kind of create some awareness about this type of addiction, because I don't think it is spoke about. But the documentary you might be talking about is on Channel 4. It was called Porn on the Brain.
Yeah, I think it was that. I only got like bits of it, and there was just a guy that if he seen a woman, he had to go to the toilet to.
That's right.
Do that, and I just thought, with a lot of these documentaries, you don't know if they're real or not, and that was the only time I've ever seen that pop up before. And when you say about being 11, because you're 30s now, how did you watch it when you were 11? Because when we were growing up, the only thing that ever came on maybe Eurotrash on a Friday night or something like that. That was probably about as good as it got when you were younger, or a magazine that was going around the school. So how did you get into it at 11?
Yeah, I think we must be the same age, John, because Eurotrash, it's just, I remember that. So for me, I found basically my dad's stash of VHS videos, pornography videos when I was 11. So I was just as a curious young boy, really, just rummaging around and found these VHS videos, and they were all marked XXX, which at the time I didn't know what that was. All I knew was they were in a place different to the rest of the videos in the house, and I kind of thought these must be, a bit curious. What are these? And stuck one on when my parents were out. One of the VHS videos, and at first I was probably taken aback and shocked what was on the videos. But what happened really over probably the coming weeks and months after that is I was sort of drawn to go back and watch these different videos and probably search for different material on these porn videos. And what I understand now, obviously, with some of the research that's being done, and that Porn on the Brain documentary showed that, scientists and doctors have done a lot of studies on it now, and they've shown that the same chemicals are released in the brain when people watch pornography as when they take heroin or cocaine. So the same chemicals are released in the brain, such as like dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. There's a few other chemicals as well, but it's got that same addictive power as sort of like hard drugs, basically. So and that was obviously the younger you are, and as your brain's developing, the more it can affect you. So I understand now why I felt drawn to go back and watch the material again. I was slowly becoming addicted and becoming reliant on those chemicals. And on that high it was giving me. But I think sadly, really, I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't realise, and as a young lad, maybe it's probably similar to people that are watching this podcast now, especially men, that at school it was seemed normal. Mates, you'd talk about pornography. All my mates would seem like they were watching it. I remember one of the clubs I was at, one of the professional clubs I was at, one of the players brought in a pornography DVD, stuck it on in the players' lounge, and we all sat around and watched it. And I guess that's how accepted and how common it was in that sort of environment. And I think any guy watching this that's been in that environment will probably be able to relate to that. And it was never really spoke about as an addiction, or it was just seen as harmless fun, pornography. And I think in society now, really, in a lot of most areas in society, that's how pornography is viewed. It's like, what's wrong with it? It's not a problem.
How much did you watch? So when you say you're addicted when you're like a young lad, because 11 seems quite young. I thought maybe be like 12, 13. It's probably that one have helped because you were so young when you were exposed to it.
Yeah.
How much were you watching? Is it just how long you're watching it each time, or was it every day, or?
Yeah, so I think to start with, because I obviously was living at home with my parents, it was almost like whenever got the opportunity. So if my parents were out, and I had a brother, so if my brother were out, I'd sort of just stick a video on and watch it that way. I think the addiction for me developed more once I got into my late teens and the internet came around. That's probably when the addiction really started, and when I moved out of my parents, and obviously I had more time and more access to pornography. That's when I became addicted. When I look back, I wasn't probably addicted when I was 11, 12, 13. I think it developed more in my late teens, early 20s, that addiction. But I would say, I was probably watching it every day for a couple of hours a day. Talk about it in my book, and the reality is, when you say addicted to pornography, I was addicted to masturbation, and that's something that you don't hear a lot about. I'm because I've dealt with it and I'm quite open about talk, but you won't hear many blokes talking about that. So yeah, I would say my sort of going into my early 20s is when the addiction really took a hold of me. And then that developed into sex addiction because it's something I know we're going to mention about this probably later on in the podcast, but I speak in schools now and educate young people about the harmful effects of pornography. And, there's different stages to porn addiction. And stage one is where you're sort of watching it and you feel drawn to go back to watch it again. Stage two is where you feel like you've got to search for more explicit material to get that same high. Stage three is where you've almost got to go out and act out what you've seen to get the same high. Does that make sense? So you can see how that develops into a sex addiction, because if you're watching, whatever it is, threesomes, fivesomes on pornography, and that's sexually satisfying you, after a while it's not. You've got to go out and do that to get that same sort of sexual high. And I'm kind of not. I want to be careful because I don't want to sound like I'm sort of saying if you watch pornography, you're going to become addicted. I don't want to come across as saying that, because I know it's different for everyone. It's like sort of saying it's like an alcoholic saying don't drink because you'll get addicted. Well,
there's different levels of everything, isn't there?
Yeah, there's different levels, and I think certain things affect different people as well. So yeah, I hope that explains it a little bit deeper.
Did it affect your rugby? Because I can imagine, there's that old saying with Mickey off Rocky, isn't it? Women, weak and legs. I can imagine if you're watching that and you're going, I'm assuming you're going with women as well. Do you think that affected the rugby side of things with testosterone and things like that? Or especially if you're going rugby and you're thinking, I want to get back to watch whatever's on, or?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. I don't think it affected my rugby in that respect of the physical, act of watching pornography or being addicted to sex. I think where it did affect this is my life in general, but especially my rugby, was because I became, and this is the same for a lot of people addicted to porn and sex, is you become very promiscuous. That's one of the things pornography does. It makes you become very promiscuous. You start to objectify women. So you look at women more as objects rather than, people with feelings and emotions. And that's one of the things that pornography it does do. But yeah, I think what the way that it affected me is I was very unsettled in my in my personal life, as in with girlfriends. So I found it very difficult to keep a regular girlfriend, because obviously to get a girlfriend, you know, we'd sort of be together a while, and then I'd end up, you know, being unfaithful to her because I was addicted to sex. And then, so we might be together 2 years, say, for example, and, you know, get another girl. And I think having that unsettled sort of life in that way, that sort of personal life, or your relationships might be a better way to say it, being unsettled in that, I think did affect my rugby to a degree, but I think it was only a small degree. Yeah, so
because you see a lot of top sportsmen that they seem to be settled down from a young age, don't they? They've got the wife and the kid, and you sometimes look, and the one that's a bit of a hell child who's going out, and that the careers don't seem to be as long, do they? They're like a firework, like talented, but that settled home life just makes a big difference. So you're not getting grief when you come home from training, you can relax, and your girlfriend's like, who the hell's Sarah that's been ringing the house while you're at training and stuff, and them sort of hassles no one needs, do they?
No, I like the way you put that, John. Yeah, but that is the reality of it, you know. And for me, when I talk about the porn and the sex addiction and what it did to me, yeah, I was living a double life, you know, similar to what you said. You know, I was living that sort of settled sort of family relationship, but then I was living the other side. It was like a double life. I was, you know, doing all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think probably a good example is like Tiger Woods. Really, I think he came crashing down. You know, when he was, I guess, when the media exposed. You know, and he I think he spoke about that he was addicted to sex. I think he managed to keep that quiet for a long time, and it almost helped him in his career. But as soon as that came to light and he had to deal with that, obviously then his career took a massive downward turn, because he was having to deal with the fallout of everything that he'd done. He'd been exposed. So yeah, I think go on, John.
Especially for young lads coming through now, like they've got the internet on the phone. You can be on your phone. You can get anything on your phone in 2 seconds. Like we were jokingly saying at the start, we had Eurotrash on a Friday night, 10:30 or whatever the hell time it come on. And that was about as good as it got. Or a magazine, like you said, magazine at Pashan School. Yeah. Whereas if you're saying this is like the addiction that it is, the young lads coming through now, that it's going to be terrible for them, isn't it? Because they're exposed to it at a younger age, they can get more of it.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I've got that passion to speak about it in schools, which hasn't happened since sort of COVID started. But yeah, for probably 4 or 5 years now, I've been going into high schools and talking about the harmful effects of pornography, sharing my own story as well. And I think it's important, like you said, now it's so accessible. When I was a kid, I had to search around and find these VHS videos. Now, like you say, on smartphones, they've got access to so much, you know, unlimited pornography. And I think that's why it's so important that children are educated, you know, from a young age. And I'm talking from probably 10, 11 years old. You know, they say the average age that a child's first exposed to pornography is 10 years old, and that's getting younger and younger. And like you said, you know, and another stat that I talk about in schools is that 25% of all Google searches every day is for pornography. So that's 1 in 4 Google searches every single day is for pornography. So, you know, let's be honest, it is a big part of our world. And I think it's still not spoke about enough. It's still too taboo a subject. And sadly, it's still not part of the curriculum in schools. You know, sex education is, but they don't have to talk specifically about pornography. And I think that's probably where, you know, schools that I've been in, you know, they'll invite me in to speak, and then, you know, 9 times out of 10, they'll invite me back the year after, because they see the value in it. And they'll see that probably the conversations that it's kind of, you know, forced the kids to have, and with the teachers, and it's opened those pathways of conversation about it. I know. I'll just say this. There was a guy called Dr. Jeffrey Satinover, and he was talking to the US Senate committee, and a few years ago about pornography, and this is what he said. He said, "It is as though we have devised a form of heroin 100 times more powerful than before, usable in the privacy of one's own home and injected directly to the brain through the eyes." And he was obviously referring to pornography. And I think, I say that when I go into schools, and I say, a lot of people think, oh, come on, Andy, you're referring to pornography as being as powerful as heroin, and 100 times more powerful than heroin. But it's like, until you've experienced it, I think it's, you don't always know. And I think that education is just key, because we can't stop. I think the thing with it now, with the smartphones, we can't stop that kids getting access.
The check on them, I do it in my stand-up routine, like to get on an exotic website, we'll call it. All it says is click, are you 18? Take you to the good stuff, or no, back to Google. I mean, how many 16-year-old lads are getting to that point and say, I'm a lot of things, but I'm not a liar? Do you know what I mean? Do you know, like, it's not like you've got to put your birth certificate in or anything like that. Yeah. That's just not even a safety check, is it? And if mums and dads are trying to put locks on the phones, kids know more about iPhones and computers than the parents. They'll probably put an anti-lock on so the parents can't get on, can they? So it's a subject that it's something I've never really looked at, like looked into, like addiction or anything like that. But you can see how it's a massive problem. Oh, it's going to get worse, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think I work with a charity called the Naked Truth Project. They're based in Manchester, and they were doing a lot of sort of lobbying around the government to get, to verify their age, for people to verify their age and to go on to these pornography sites. And they put something in place, and then they withdrew it. So they put it in place in law, but then they withdrew it last year, which was really disappointing, because that would have then basically, people would have had to verify their age, and it wouldn't have just been click a button to say you're 18. There would have been, a proper way that they would have had to prove their age. So I think that's something that needs to definitely come in place. And obviously I'm speaking from my own experiences, so I'm quite passionate about that.
Well, you're an ex-professional rugby league player as well. That I think makes a big difference. It's like when people start talking, it's like mental health. I'd say 15 years ago in rugby league, mental health wasn't really that big of a subject. I can only go back, like, just say I went into a change room and said, guys, I'm feeling a bit down. People would tell you to take your Tampax out. That would be the instant reaction. But it's now, that's changed a little bit, hasn't it? Everyone's a bit nicer now, a bit more sympathetic.
Yeah.
And this will be the same with this one. At the start, it'll be like, what's he talking about? And then there'll be a few people that watch it and go, I tell you what, I think I'm on that a bit too much. And I'm starting to get them same trigger points as Andy's talking about. And it's one of them, isn't it? I think it's good to talk about, especially people like yourself coming out to talk about it.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that, I didn't want to do it. I'll be honest, when I just felt called to talk about it and share my story, and I didn't want to do it at first. I think that pride and that bit of that shame and embarrassment, I think there's a lot of that around it, and I think that's why people don't talk about it. But yeah, and definitely, like you said, I know, like, I've watched a few things recently, and it's talked about in the lockdowns, how much people are, more so viewing pornography. I don't know the stats on it, but I've seen a few, and it's gone through the roof in lockdown as pornography use. But yes, it's certainly.
But people still joking about it, aren't they? I think it was on one of the big pages, not Lad Bible or something like that, where like Pornhub had opened up like free videos or something like that, and everyone was brilliant, and all these memes of like Pornhub completed. That's what people were putting on, weren't they? Like in lockdown. So it still has that element. People still aren't taking it that seriously, are they?
Yeah, and it's something I show in schools. I show a video from 1950, and it's a video. It's an advert, actually. It's an advert from 1950 where doctors. You might have seen this, John, but it's got doctors recommending Camel cigarettes. They're good for your health and they're good for your throat. And I use this example because I say, look at this. This is like, so not that long ago, it's 70 years ago that doctors were telling us that smoking is good for your health. And I use that example to say the same thing that is happening with pornography. What we once thought was harmless fun, fill your boots, watch as much as it if you want. It's not doing you any harm. we are slowly realising the dangers and how harmful it is. The same thing, I use the example of cocaine. They used to use cocaine as toothache medication back in I think it was early 1900s. They used to give kids heroin. They used to give kids heroin as a morphine substitute. And obviously now we look back and we're like, we wouldn't dream of doing that because the science is there and we understand how harmful cocaine is, how harmful heroin is. We know about smoking now. We know smoking can kill you. It can cause lung disease, lung cancer. And it's a slow process because it always is. It always is a slow process. But we are now understanding how harmful pornography is. I think it's getting there, but it's always been the same. When you look back through history, it's always been a slow process for that to filter through to society and us to understand more about it.
Well, it was only last year that WHO, World Health Organization, said COVID couldn't pass person to person, isn't it? And that was only 1 year ago. So you can see how things catch up. But it's great. It's great that you talked about it. Before we go, we've got to talk about the family courts as well. You went through a bad time with the family courts. I've never been through anything like that, but I always see on social media, and obviously this is just an idiot talking about it, it always seems to be like the dad always seems to get a raw deal, unless I've just got friends that always seem to get a raw deal in the courts. Is that something you found when you went?
Yeah, so, I mean, again, talk about it extensively in my book, this. I've got two daughters. I've got 4 children altogether, so I've got 2 daughters from a previous relationship. And then I've got my stepson and my youngest daughter that live with me. We had, so my 2 daughters that I've got with my ex-partner, me and my wife, my now wife, we had pretty much them 50-50 with my ex-partner for 9 years. And then I went back into the family court about 2 years, just before COVID, a year before COVID started, so about 2 years ago. And basically, a judge basically said, I can't see my 2 daughters anymore that I've got with my ex-partner, but obviously I've got my 2 children that live with me. And it just makes no sense. And they're the sort of rulings that have been made in the family court. So it's on a personal level, obviously it's devastating for me and my family. But there's definitely a bias there. There's definitely a bias within the family court system when it comes to mothers and fathers, because I believe in law, mothers and fathers have equal rights.
Yeah.
But sadly, in the family court system, it can rarely go in the favour of dads, which is really sad. And I think the other thing is that the family courts, you might not know this, John, but some people call them secret courts, because you're publicly not allowed to report on any of the decisions or any of the rulings that are made. So that's another reason you don't hear a lot about the family courts, especially when it comes to like child contact, because a lot of like the media and things like that, they're not allowed to report on it. They're almost gagged. Which again, what that creates then in the family courts is there's no accountability. So judges can make these type of decisions, like was made in my case, and there's no accountability there. They don't have to answer to anyone, because it's not being made public. And I think that's something that needs to change. Me and my wife and my 2 children that live with me, we did a protest on Downing Street last August.
Right.
Just to try and sort of make a bit of noise and try and force some change around the family court system. But I just think, sadly, I don't think it's going to happen. I spoke to a magistrates judge only last week, is a magistrates judge in somewhere in the south of the country, and he was telling me that during Tony Blair's when he was Prime Minister, they did kind of a review of the family court system, which I think was massive for a lot of people that, like myself, that are fighting for change. they decided to do like a massive review because of what people were saying about it. And this review found that there was nothing wrong with the system, which was just a massive blow to all those people that were sort of campaigning for change and fathers' rights. A lot of people know about Fathers for Justice. The guys that are climbing up the buildings dressed as Batman.
I've seen them.
Yeah. And although it's good and it raises awareness, it doesn't really make any difference, sadly, to the system. I think it just needs somebody in the system, in power, that's going to really stand up and really make a change for anything to change. So yeah, that's just to talk about my own situation a little bit, and I know there's a lot of dads out there
there's loads in there. Like I see on every time I look on the timeline, it's ex-partners arguing. It always seems to be the dad trying to see the kids, and obviously this is just timelines and stuff like that, but it always seems to be that way around.
Yeah, no, that's no, you're right, John, and that's certainly been my experience. Is that the system, the family court system's massively biased towards mothers. In my opinion, and obviously, couples split up and there's kids involved, every day. And I think it just should be an automatic 50-50, between mum and dad in terms of care of the kids, unless obviously there's anything else involved if the kids are at any risk of being harmed or whatever. But that wasn't the case for me. Social services weren't involved or anything like that. It was just we'd had my two daughters, for 9 years, 50-50. And the reason I went back into the court was just to try and get some more holiday time with them, because we could only take them away for 1 week in the summer, whereas my ex-partner could take them away for like up to a month at a time. So it was just to try and get a bit more holiday time with them. And obviously that ended in me not seeing them. I've not seen them now for been nearly 2 years. And so any dad out there that's sort of in that system, I feel for them, because it's heavily biased in mum's favour. And I'm not saying that there's no cases where dad gets a good result, because I got a good result when I first went to court sort of 10 years ago. I had a really good judge, but I think they're far and few between.
It's tough for everyone involved, though, isn't it? Because your kids will want to see the dad as well, won't they? Which is a sad state of affairs, that they can't see them all the time, and it's sad for you. And it's always hard with ex-partners, because you're obviously ex for a reason, aren't you? And you're never going to see middle ground there. But like you say, the courts could maybe look at it in a different way. Yeah,
I think the whole system needs overhauling. But when I look at it, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, because it's going to take a lot of money to kind of to do that. So yeah.
No, well, fingers crossed something happens, because you never know, do you? You just need Ratchford on Twitter to mention it, or someone like that. It's amazing what things getting changed. I don't know if you've seen them free dinners that were going out that were meant to last a family for 2 weeks. I think that they tilled it up. It cost about £4 or something, maybe £35 worth of food. Yeah. So you never know what's going to happen in the future around the corner. We live in a social media world now, and if enough people talk about it like this, someone massive like Ratford and that shares it, it's amazing what gets changed at the minute. Yeah.
No, you're right, and I think it's great. Somebody like that, I don't think he gets enough credit, Marcus Rashford, for that, because he's a young guy. He's putting his head on the line, really, because you know what it's like, John. If he has a couple of bad games, people start saying, "Oh, he's concentrating too much on other things." He should be concentrating on his football. So I just think someone like Marcus Rashford is just a shining example of what a lot of them sort of people in that position can do.
Well, he bought a house, didn't he? I'm sure that he bought a couple of properties. And obviously the media, because they're all work together, and they're like, "Oh well, why doesn't he spend that money on helping kids?" You're like, "Well, he's not the government, is he? Really? He's a young rich guy investing in the future."
He's put his neck on line, and that's going to happen. He's going to get criticised, because that's what the media like to do. They like to build people up and knock them down, as we've seen with other high profile sports people and celebrities. But yeah, credit to him.
Oh, well, that's what I mean. You'll see him. What they'll do, they'll try and say that he was on Epstein's Island, or it'll be some mental one. There won't be no truth in it, but that headline will be out. Then they'll forget about it, and then that's it, isn't it? And then everyone else will be a bit like, I tell you what, I don't know if I'm going to mention free dinners again after what happened to Rashford, because that's what they do, don't they?
Yeah, and I know, like, just going off topic, but so on the news the other day, Meghan, and I think it was Meghan Markle that won a court case against the newspapers. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just thought that's fantastic. Yeah, good on her, because I think it's not right. It's not right that they can, they can just say what they want and just tell lies. I don't think it's right.
Well, the royal family and everything like that, I don't know why people are so interested. You're talking about something from like when you've done history in school, monarchs and stuff like that. Now, I bet other countries just looking and think, well, what are they doing with that crown on and stuff like? Because they don't have any power or anything anymore. Probably just laughing, aren't they?
Yeah. Mind you, those, I think, like America, they think it's great, don't they? Look at our royal family and they sort of think, because they don't have that, it's almost like that they sort of look at that and think, oh wow, it's sort of like magical kingdom sort of thing. Yeah.
They could have ours, couldn't they? Relieve a bit of tax money or something like that. But Andy, it's been absolutely quality talking to you. Hopefully in the courts that gets sorted. And obviously the addiction thing, hopefully more lads look into that, because I think that'll be something that people are watching and think, I tell you what, I'm probably watching too much of that. And it's good that you're talking about it and stuff like that.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to get hold of a book, it's called Scandalous Freedom, and it's available on Amazon, or it's available on my website, scandalousfreedom.co.uk. So yeah, it's I've just been encouraged by people that have read it, and the feedback, which a lot of it is on Amazon, if anybody wants to have a look on there. So yeah, thanks for inviting me on, John. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Andy. Thanks a lot.